The Everglades has also stood in the way of South Florida's rapacious appetite for development. While stubbornly resisting huge public and private projects to drain it entirely, by the early 20th century the Everglades was being diminished to the extent that there was mounting concern that this one-of-a-kind place needed protection, or it would be forever lost. A large portion of the glades just below Lake Okeechobee had already become the Everglades Agricultural Area, 700,000 acres of sugarcane fields and vegetable farms, as huge public works projects were beginning to control floods and provide for architectural and municipal water supplies. Massive public works projects enabled constant human encroachment along its periphery, with cities, suburbs, universities, and farms occupying areas that were once Everglades wetlands. Eventually responding to public concern for the Everglades as a unique and biologically important wetland, Congress authorized a national park for the Everglades in 1935. There followed a great struggle among competing interests that both delayed the park's formal establishment and limited its extent. Finally, in 1947, a significant segment of the southern Everglades was set aside by President Harry Truman with great ceremony as a national park, to be protected for generations to come. This was a scaled-down version of the conservationists' ideal, but it was the compromise necessary to move the idea forward. Big Cypress National Preserve and Biscayne National Park were later designated to include protection of some of the original features of Everglades protection that the conservation-minded people had proposed. Everglades National Park was something new, a national park established to protect the southern Everglades, its strange wildness, and its curious intersection of temperate and tropical plants and animals. It was to be a national park without majestic mountains. Indeed, the park has a maximum elevation of 10 feet over its 1.5 million acres. There is no breathtaking canyon or giant trees. It was the first park established largely to protect the biology of an immense and complicated wetland. The struggle to preserve this precious place is an object lesson for the broader struggles facing the preservation of national parks across America. A key objective in establishing the national park at the downstream end of the Everglades was to preserve the colonies of wading birds, ibises, wood storks, and egrets, whose massive flights once could block out the sun, as well as a significant portion of the Everglades' subtropical assemblage of alligators, crocodiles, snail kites, Florida panthers, and manatees. Today there remain places in the park where you can trek or boat and see a half-dozen endangered species in an afternoon. Yet by the 1960s the wading bird colonies were declining, and by the 1970s and 1980s most were gone. The most widely cited, though somewhat poorly documented, estimate suggested that there had been a 90% decline. It was becoming clear that providing national park status in and of itself had not guaranteed protection of the Everglades from the consequences of intense development outside its boundary. South Florida's demand for flood control, crop irrigation, and water supply was disrupting the processes that created and maintained the Everglades ecosystem. Ominously, a mere decade after park designation, the managers of Everglades National Park found themselves failing in their mission. Worse, they had no clear understanding of why the decline in nesting wading birds was happening, or what should be done to reverse the demise of one of the park's signature resources. The traditions and within-boundary management successes of the Great Western Parks had little relevance to a park that was dependent on a landscape rapidly changing, thanks to human hubris and interference. Although the Everglades story is an extreme example of a park in peril, many other parks today are surrounded by changing landscapes and processes beyond their managers' understanding and control. The fundamental lesson from the Everglades is that if national parks are to persist, national park staffs must, first and foremost, have an in-depth, science-based understanding of the resources they manage, and an effective means of sharing that understanding with advocates and decision-makers at all levels of our society. Herein we seek to champion a solid science foundation for park management as an absolute requirement for the salvation of America's